There's a better world that's a-comin', tell you why. There's a better world that's a-comin', tell you why. We will beat 'em on the land, on the sea, and in the sky.
The Depression was still there, and nobody had any money, and Dad was not able to make ends meet on the farm, and so he decided that it's time for us to make another move, and he contracted the school board, who were looking for a person to look after the school, to run the boilers and keep the place clean. And of course, Dad, having been a stoker in the Navy, steam and boilers were right down his avenue. So he applied for the job and was hired to start in the summer of 1938. Now, we were still living on mile 2, so we were going to have to move, and Dad said that we were going to move into Starbuck, and I was quite excited because although I enjoyed living on the farm, living in the big town of Starbuck, population of maybe 200, was really a move up. So Dad bought a house on 3rd Street, and the house actually had 2 bedrooms upstairs and a combination living room, kitchen downstairs. Well, there were rumors that I was soon to have a brother, and so the accommodation in the house would be rather crowded. So Dad bought the house, and he spent most of the spring building a kitchen and back porch onto the house. Also, and to my delight, he got the house wired, and so we were going to have electricity for the first time in my life. And I certainly looked forward to that. So when school ended in the spring, we made the big move to Starbuck. And I had one of the rooms upstairs, and Mother was pregnant, carrying a baby. And in April, Mom went to Grandma's place, and Dad and I batched, and my brother Tom was born, and Mother stayed with my grandparents and Tom at their place until after the move was over, and lo and behold, she brought this squally little baby home, and that was the beginning of a whole different life. Dad began work in the fall, looking after the school, and I got an allowance. I was given 5 cents a week that I could spend on anything I wanted, and which I did. And in this day and age, if you were given a nickel, you wouldn't know what to do with it. But to me, it took all week to plan how I was going to spend my nickel on come weekend. But the life was different. We had electricity, and wow, that was a whole different thing. No longer trying to squint to read a book or look at anything. And our new house had 2 stoves in it. One was the big old kitchen stove, which we heated, and the other one was a coke heater, which was coke is a type of coal, which heated the rest of the building. And the coke didn't burn down inside of an hour. This used to provide heat all winter long, and what a great thing. Well, so we moved in and started life in the big city of Starbuck. We got settled in, and just a year later, Tom was born to add to our family. And mother and baby were quite happy and got along well. However, with the addition of one more body in the house, things were a little crowded, and as a consequence, in 1936, Dad decided that it just wasn't profitable to work on the farm any longer, and he decided that he would be best off working for a company with a guaranteed salary rather than skimping along and going from day to day, not knowing what we were going to be eating the next day. So as a consequence, Dad got a job as the janitor of the school in Starbuck. And so in the fall of 36, we bought a house in Starbuck and proceeded to get rid of all of our livestock and chickens and everything, and moved into a new house, not a new house, but for us, a new house in Starbuck. That house was a 2-story house. It had just a large, when we bought it, just a large living room and kitchen combined, and then upstairs there were 2 bedrooms. So Tom and I shared the one bedroom, and Mom and Dad shared the other one. The area was once again still too cramped, so Dad got busy and started to build an extension onto the house, and decided that we would have a great big kitchen of the lean-to onto the existing house. And Dad started carpentering, and before long we had a new kitchen added onto the house. And while he was building and putting in that, he also decided that it was time that we got into the modern world and installed electricity into our house. And so for the first time in my life, I was able to read under electricity lights and not to huddle in front of a a kerosene lamp to see what I was doing. And it added a whole different prospect to our life. Also with power, we bought a radio, and we were able to listen to music all the time. No more crystal sets, and things were getting real modern. And also, we got a telephone installed. And the telephone was installed on the wall. And we were on what is called party line. And there were 8 other people on the same line. And so when the phone rang, you had to listen to how many rings it made to know who was being called. And our phone number was one long ring and 2 short. So, but it was interesting. You would get that call, and you'd pick up the phone, and you'd hear click, 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 as half a dozen other people lifted the telephone just to see what was going on at the Olsen place. And so it became quite a community phone, but it was a move up, and we looked forward to all the new modern aspirations of what that phone could bring. Now, work went on. Dad, as I say, was the janitor, and before long, we found that he was also decided that he was going to work for the municipality. And so in the summertime, he worked for the rural municipality of McDonald on the road building unit. And Dad would go to work on the road building thing on Monday morning, and we wouldn't see him until Saturday afternoon, when his 5.5 day work week was over. And so Mom and I had to undertake the looking after of the school auditorium and so forth during the summertime, and on into the fall. And once the weather turned to rain, Dad and the road building equipment would cease work, and Dad came in, and then he took over the working and the maintenance of the school and thing. But life was quite different living in the farm or living in the town, and there were people about. I made friends, and life became a whole lot easier. I explained to you how the first year in school I got all of those diseases. Well, now I was at 10 years old, I was almost immune to anything that was going on. However, there were lots of things to do, and strangely enough, you would wonder what to do. You didn't have television, you didn't have portable radio, you didn't have a telephone. However, we found lots of things to do, and I, along with my brother Tom, decided that the river, LaSalle River, was a main function of most kids' lives in Starbuck, and we swam in the river from May 1st on until it froze over, and then I acquired an old boat, and the boat was was made out of tin, believe it or not, on a wooden frame, and we had a set of oars, and we would row that thing and do exploration and all kinds of fun. And one summer, with this boat, we decided that it's time to try and learn to sail. So I equipped the old tin boat with a mast. The mast must have been all of 8 feet high, and we smuggled a cotton sheet out of the house, and that became our sail. And so we rigged a square sail. Now, this would get you, the only way we could sail was with the wind behind us, and normally the wind always blew on the river from north to south. And so we were at the south end, and so we would get in, the two of us, and row the boat a half a mile to the next bend in the river north of us, and then pull the sail up and roar back until we ran out of wind again back home. So it was quite an experience. And as I say, we could only sail with the wind behind us, so that was not what it should be. And along the way, we decided that we would build a racing boat. Now, in those days, we were able to find an old one-cylinder Johnson outboard motor with the tank on the top of it, and no transmission. It was just you swung it. If you wanted to go forward, you pulled the handle towards you. If you wanted to go back, you turned the handle around and you could back up. So we built this boat. It was a 4 feet wide and 6 feet long, and it was flat. And the difficulty was that when we got it all finished, we found that when we mounted the motor on it, and if I stood when the motor wasn't running, the back end would go underwater. Well, that was not the best idea for a speedboat, so I had to find out a way. So you had to position yourself in the front of the boat, reach back, start the motor, start moving, and once you were moving, then you could move back to the back end, and away you went. And it got some pretty good speeds. It didn't sit in the water at all. It was just booting along on the top of the waves. The only difficulty was that when you stopped, you had to paddle back by sitting on the front end of the boat, because if I'm sitting at the back end, the boat's underwater. But that was a great pastime for Tom and I. Cliff, he was born in 1937, and he didn't get into too much of that, but it was fun and games. Our house in Starbuck was, I should explain that Starbuck was divided into 2 pieces, with the river running through the town and on, and so the commercial end of Starbuck, the stores and garage and elevators and grain elevators and so forth, were on the south side, and we lived on the north side, which was cut off from the main town by the bridge, or by the river, and connected but with a bridge. Now, this meant that when I had to go to school, I had to walk south across the bridge, then run north on the other side of the river to the school. Well, Dad and a few other neighbors decided that what we needed was a footbridge closer to our place that we could use to cross the river as a shortcut to school, and it would cut just about a mile of walking off because so they got busy and cut down a bunch of poplar trees and picked a spot for the bridge and drove these darn old saplings into the mud and nailed up some cross pieces and got some planks. Now the planks were 2 by 12, but they seemed pretty goddamn narrow. But and they just put these planks on the bridges across the river, and then put 2 railings, one on either side. Now, if you were to see that today, you would say there's no way that I'm going to cross that bridge. But we did it every day, and nobody ever fell off of it, fortunately. And it was great from the moment that the ice went out in the spring until the next spring, because we would cross the bridge, our little footbridge, in the winter after the ice had frozen. But once the ice moved out, then we had a period of time while the water was high that we would have to walk. But it was a real quick way of getting to school. In the year 1937, I had always had problems with my tonsils. They would swell up and I'd have a sore throat, and I guess some of that was attributed to my bout with all of the diseases when I first started school. So Mom and Dad decided that I should get my tonsils out. They decided, I never did recall seeing a doctor about it. And so one day, Mom explained to me that I was going to have to go to Winnipeg, and Aunt Florence was going to meet me at the bus depot, and she was going to, the next day, take me to Misericordia Hospital, and I was going to have my tonsils removed. Well, this was quite a shock, and I said, am I going alone? And she said, well, I've got the kids to look after, and your dad's busy working, and so you'll be okay. So 2 days later, Mom walked me down to the bus station, and I bought a ticket to Winnipeg, and she had the 2 boys with her, and they put me on the bus, and away I went to Winnipeg. I'd never been to Winnipeg before, and but I figured that the driver knew how to get there, so that was a bit. So we drove to Winnipeg, pulled into the bus depot in downtown Winnipeg, and lo and behold, there was my Aunt Florence to meet me. And she took me, and we went down to Portage Avenue and caught a streetcar and went into the West End as far as Furby Street and walked down Furby Street to where Aunt Florence lived in a big apartment block. And I spent the day and night with Florence. And the next morning we got up and walked down the street 2 blocks, and there was the hospital. And she walked in, and they seemed to know everything was coming along, and they took me and put me in a room, and I had to take my clothes off and put on a gown, and before long in came the doctor, and then I had to go into an operating room, and they gave me some gas, and next thing I know, I'm waking up and I got a sore throat. But I laid in bed in the hospital for a couple hours, and there Aunt Flora shows up, and I get dressed, and away we walk back, and I still got a sore throat. So Aunt Flora says, "Well, I know how to fix that." So we dropped into a little store, and she bought me a great big ice cream cone. And outside of the ice cream that we had made back on the farm, this is the first time this stuff was tasted very nice, and it tasted like strawberry, and it helped to fix my throat. So I spent that day and that next night at Aunt Flora's, and I was feeling better the next morning, and so off we go up to Portage Avenue, catch the streetcar, go downtown Winnipeg, and down to the bus depot, and Aunt Flora buys a bus ticket and puts me on the bus, and there I was, on my way back again at 10 years old, back to Starbucks, where I met Mom waiting, and the kids waiting at the bus depot. Now this was quite an experience, but it did have a happy ending. I didn't really have a sore throat after that. I didn't dare, and but as a reward for my participating in this, Mom and Dad bought me a brand new coaster wagon. Now this wagon was made out of wood, and it had metal wheels, and it was shiny and polished, and it had a metal handle. And the reason they called it a coaster wagon was that not only could you load things in it and pull it around, but you could coast it by sitting on the side of the wagon with, like, on my right leg, with my left foot hanging over the side, and I could push myself along, and you could it was a heck of a lot quicker than walking. And before long, I found that I could coast this thing quicker than I could walk, and before fall, I was able to take my coaster wagon out onto the highway and coast 1.5 miles east to where Grandpa and Grandma Polton lived. And I would go down there and spend the day, and then after the day was over, I'd coast back again to Starbucks. And I used to do that quite a deal, quite a lot. And over a period of at least a couple of years, until I finally grew out of the coaster wagon and found an old bicycle that I was able to convince Dad to buy, and then I started using that. But that's the reward to having your tonsils out was getting a coaster wagon. Well, everything went along good in the townhouse with the two new boys in accommodation and myself and Mom and Dad. We were very, very comfortable and very happy to be in a big town. Dad got a car. It, of course, wasn't a new car. It was an old Model T Ford, but nonetheless, we had wheels, and we had the telephone, and we had a radio, and we had electricity, and the world was just great until all of a sudden, over in Europe, Hitler decided in 1939 to take over the world and declared war and invaded Poland. And immediately England and all the free world, with the exception of the Americans, declared war on Germany. And immediately the call went out for people, men between the ages of 18 and 35, to forget what they were doing and join in the armed forces to help protect freedom for the rest of the world. And in the fall, all of a sudden, all of our younger adult males disappeared, and they were in training camps and mobilized into the Army and the Air Force. And speaking of Air Force, while we were in Manitoba, there was a big training base set up at Portage la Prairie to train pilots to fly. Well, in 1939, you never did see or hear an airplane fly over. There was very little happening. And all of a sudden, you would be sitting in your schoolroom, and there would be this buzzing, and everybody got up and roared to the windows to look out to try and see these planes flying by. And it was strange because we had never seen them fly before. And also there was a Army base in Portage la Prairie, and they used to come through down the highway with all of their big military trucks and pulling guns, and it was an exciting time. It was also a time that all of a sudden they put restrictions on what you could buy and grow in food. You needed stamps to buy meat, and you needed stamps to buy butter and sugar and ration books. And however, it was no hardship for us who lived in the country because we had good access to butter, and we never did have to worry too much about meat because Grandpa Polton did his annual slaughter, and once it was freezing, he would butcher a cow and 2 or 3 pigs, and it would all be cut up and distributed through the family, and we would keep this meat in a steel 45-gallon barrel that was sitting out in the snowbank outside with a lid on it, and that was our refrigeration. And so it was a good time. Like I say, all of the younger people went away to train for war, and Dad, who was working as the janitor at the school, went to work for the municipality, building roads, and that because the operators had left their jobs and gone to the training. And so Mom and I took over the work of cleaning the school. And while Dad was away building roads. Now, when I say school, I think I mentioned before that we had two schools. One was the elementary school, and it was a big 2-story brick building with 4 big classrooms in it. And the other was a brand new high school, which was built out of wood and only had 2 rooms in it, but it was brand new and had oil heating, so we didn't have to use the boiler or anything like that. But it didn't have any running water. So, as a consequence, the toilets in the high school and the toilets in the elementary school had to be flushed every afternoon by hand. It was my job, and there was a pump in the old school in the basement, and I would pump water and fill 2 pails and then carry those pails into the washrooms and dump water down each toilet. There were 4 stools in the boys' toilet and 4 stools in the girls' toilet. So I had to carry 16 pails of water daily to dump down those toilets. And then, of course, there was the high school. It didn't have a pump in it, and so I had to carry the water from the old school into the new school. And so it was quite a bit of work for a guy who was only 10, 11 years old. However, we persisted, and I would help Mom every day after school to get everything done. And of course, later on in the year, pardon me, as the frost began to come down, Dad came back because they couldn't build roads, and he took over our chores and did that so that we had winter off before Dad went to work again. We carried on, and what do you do with no television, and no radio or so forth? What do you keep doing to keep yourself busy? Well, we had a whole lot of things to do. I learned how to skate. I played on the hockey team. Once the river froze up, we would go skating on the river, and it was a delight because before the snow fell, we could skate for miles and miles and miles on the La Salle River, and just in the starlight, and it was so much fun. I set a trap line and a snare line to make some money, and I snared rabbits, and I shot squirrels, and the rabbits would get a half a dozen or so, and I would sell them to a mink ranch, which was in Starbuck, and I used to get 5 cents a piece for them, but it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it was. And so with the money I raised, I was able to invest some money, and I bought myself a 22 gun repeater. It was a Cooey 22, and this I was going to use for part of my trapping. The only problem is that during the war, you couldn't buy shells because all of the shells were going overseas to help with the war. And however, there was a clause there that if you turned in a pair of crow's feet, you could get 10, 22 shells for it, because crows were on the critter list. And but the problem is, what do you do when you don't have any? You got a rifle, but you don't have any shells. So a buddy of mine and I decided that the only way that we could catch crows would to be sneak up and grab them. Well, you can't grab a crow when it's flying, but we searched the bush and found a couple crow's nests up in trees, and we, as a consequence, climbed these trees, and sure enough, there was 3 or 4 young crows in there, but they had feet, and we proceeded to eliminate the crows, and we took 3 pairs of crow's feet, albeit they're a little bit smaller, but the post office where we turned these things in didn't really bother, so we took in 3 pair of crow's feet and walked out with 30 22 shells. Now we were in business, and we proceeded to shoot crows and turn them in, and before long we were able to accumulate a fair number of 22 shells. As winter progressed, I would supplement my income by trapping squirrels or shooting squirrels. And we had lots of bush and heavy forest around, so I would take my 22 and on a Saturday go tramping through the bush looking for squirrels, or looking for a squirrel tree. And if I could find one, I had previously bought some smoke bombs, which produced a lot of smoke, and so when I found a tree that had squirrels in it, I would take one of these bombs, which were just about the size of a 2 inches long and maybe a half an inch in diameter, like a big firecracker, and light the thing and put it in a hole in the bottom of the tree, and then stand back and watch. Before long, you could see the smoke edging out through holes in the trees, and before very long after that, you would see the squirrels start coming out of the trees. And I was quite astute with my 22, and I would shoot maybe 2 or 3. And this was great, except for one incident while shooting the squirrels in the trees. And it was a bitterly cold day, and there was about 1.5 feet of snow on the ground. And when I shot a squirrel, I would just put it in my parka pocket and skin them at home. And this particular day, I shot 2 squirrels and put them in my pocket, and all of a sudden I felt something crawling on me. And God, it started to get worse. And so, what the heck is wrong? So I stopped and took the squirrels out of my pockets, and one was just crawling with fleas. And so there in the middle of the bush at about minus 10 degrees, I had to take my parka off and strip down buck naked to get rid of all of those fleas before I could go home. And I'll never forget that. Fortunately, there was nobody else anywhere near where I was, but I'll never forget those squirrels or those fleas. That was a major time.
My heart longs for you, so won't you stay, my darling?
After the episode with the fleas, I was more selective when I put anything in my pocket. But I still continued to trap and to shoot and get furs, which I would stretch and then send away to a fur company in Winnipeg, Sidney I. Robinson, and they would give me so much a pelt, and that's how I augmented my allowance. In the spring of 40, I was still busy looking for skins, and I was walking along a field allowance, and I came across a great big hole in the ground, a nest of something. Now, I didn't really know what it was, so I set a trap at this thing, and then 2 days later I came back to inspect the trap, and lo and behold, I had trapped a skunk. Well, they're smelly, but a skin is a skin. So I shot the skunk, and I didn't put him in my pocket, but I brought him back home again to skin. And the process of curing furs is that you skin them, you turn the fur inside out, and put it on a wooden stretcher, and stretch it out and dry it, and that's the curing process. And you dry it. In the process of drying, there are bits of fat that come off the animal, and you have to scrape this off and get the skins nice and clean. Well, as I say, this was in the spring of 40, and so I brought the skunk home, and I took the skin off and stretched it and hung it out in the sun to cure. But every day a little bit more of the fat would dry, and I had to scrape that off. And for about a month at school, I was the one person that nobody would even come close to, because it certainly ruined my social life. But eventually I was finished scraping the pellet and sent it away by mail. And believe it or not, I got a check back for 75 cents, and I swore I would never do something like that again in my life, because it just wasn't worth being an outcast and having no friends for that length of time. But in the spring, when the ice would be breaking, there was lots of muskrats in the LaSalle River, and muskrat pelt was highly valuable, in that you'd get about $1 a pelt for it. And so I would walk, patrol the river, and with my .22, and when I would see a muskrat on the beach or on the bank of the shore, I would use my rifle and shoot it. And you had to be very particular, because if you just wounded the muskrat, it would immediately jump back into the water, and you wouldn't find it again. So the only way to really determine that you're going to keep the pelt is that you had to shoot the muskrat in the head, preferably in the ear, and then there was no holes in the pelt. And I would, over the course of a winter, accumulate about 2 or 3 dozen pelts of muskrat, and so that was a fair chunk of money, and I would use it to buy clothes and whatever I wanted to. It was a great time. Now, I mentioned that we used to skate on the river. We had a hockey rink in Starbuck, as well as a curling rink, and in my later years, I played on the hockey team for Starbuck, and because I couldn't skate all that well, they made me goalie, and I would play goal for the team, and we had a lot of fun. We rode about from 2 close towns, Fanisdale and Eli, and play hockey, just to pick up hockey. But as I say, I was the goalie, and I can recall that we had a dressing room, which was just beside the skating rink, and we would go in there, and there was an old barrel stove, which was just a 45-gallon drum barrel stove with a length of about 12 feet of chimney before it went outside, and the rink was quite a popular place. We would skate at night. They had music, and you could skate on that, and so forth. But it was always a sort of a place where the guys would gather. And one Saturday night, I can recall, we had the fire going in the barrel, and somebody came along and opened the door, the front door of the barrel, and threw a shotgun shell in the fire and closed the door. Well, that shotgun went off, and it blew all the chimneys off, all the pipe off of the chimney, and we just about lost the changing room. But fortunately, it didn't burn down, and we made a sound case to never throw a shell in the fire again.
We're on the air, it's hockey night tonight. Tension grows, the whistle blows, and the puck goes down the ice. The goalie jumps and the players bump and the fans all go insane. Someone roars, Bobby scores at the good old hockey game. Oh, the good old hockey game.